Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a historical rabbit hole so profoundly soothing, you might just find yourself drifting off before we even hit the main event. Imagine, if you will, the flickering gaslights of a Victorian bedroom, the heavy, velvet curtains drawn tight against the clamor of a bustling London street. You're a woman of consequence, perhaps a lady of leisure or a busy matriarch. And sleep, dear listener, is a fickle, elusive friend. You toss, you turn, the elaborate curls of your hairpins dig into your scalp, and the stifling nightgown feels less like comfort and more like a gentle silken prison. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant carriage wheel, echoes in the cavern of your sleepless mind. This wasn't just an occasional bad night. Meant for many Victorian women, insomnia was a relentless, soul-crushing epidemic. And you, my friend, are about to experience the depths of their desperation, right here, right now. You probably won't survive this thrilling journey into forgotten sleep remedies. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. If you're up for it, drop a comment below with your location and local time. It's always fascinating to see where you're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported, not by time machine, but by the gentle insistence of historical narrative, directly into the dimly lit, often stifling, bedrooms of Victorian England. The air is heavy with unspoken anxieties. The subtle scent of lavender water, mixed with the faint, lingering smell of coal smoke. Insomnia, as you quickly realize, isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's a constant gnawing presence, undermining your health, your beauty, and your very sanity. Physicians, those august figures in their severe black coats and stern expressions, often dismissed women's complaints as mere nervous afflictions or hysteria, terms that, let's be honest, basically meant it's all in your head, dear. But the struggle was very real. Imagine your delicate constitution. It's already susceptible to a myriad of perceived weaknesses, now further eroded by endless nights. You'd tried everything the family doctor initially suggested. Perhaps a warm glass of milk, a suggestion that even today holds a certain comforting, if not always effective, appeal. Or maybe a brisk walk before bed, ensuring you're adequately tired, though one must maintain one's decorum, of course, no unseemly exertion. You might even have endured a tepid bath, a rather uninspiring precursor to slumber. Mainstream medical thought, even as the Victorian era progressed, still clung to some truly wild notions about the human body. One popular theory, which we'll delve deeper into shortly, involved the idea of nervous energy. Too much nervous energy, or an imbalance of it, was thought to keep the mind buzzing and prevent sleep. It sounds a bit like trying to run your laptop on an infinite loop without ever hitting the off switch, doesn't it? This concept often led to treatments that were, to put it mildly, less than ideal. For instance, some doctors prescribed enforced bed rest. Yes, rest for insomnia, which sounds about as helpful as prescribing more sand to a desert. The idea was to conserve this precious nervous energy, but imagine lying there staring at the ceiling, explicitly told to rest, and your mind just races faster. It's the ultimate paradox of sleep. Historians still argue whether the medical community's dismissive attitude towards women's complaints was a deliberate, patriarchal suppression or a genuine reflection of their limited understanding of female physiology and psychology at the time. Was it simply a convenient way to avoid serious investigation? Or did they truly believe that a woman's delicate sensibilities made her uniquely prone to such vapors and fits? The debate, like a restless mind, continues to turn over these questions. You might have also dabbled in less conventional, more folk remedy-adjacent practices. Perhaps your maid, bless her well-meaning heart, suggested a poultice of crushed poppy, heads on your temples, a rather strong hint of what was to come in the world of sleep aids. Or maybe a sachet of hops under your pillow, which, while still a common ingredient in some modern sleep remedies, probably offered more aromatic comfort than actual sedation. Remember that charming anecdote about using crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, Victorian quackery had its own equally bizarre, albeit less odorous practices. You might even have tried counting sheep, though I suspect even sheep, after a few thousand repetitions, would start to look suspiciously like the grinning face of your insomnia. So, you're lying there, perhaps having tried the rather unhelpful counting of sheep, still wide awake. Now, let's pivot slightly and consider the intellectual landscape of Victorian medicine. Of medical thought was still steeped in traditions that would make a modern doctor scratch their head, perhaps vigorously. One particularly stubborn ghost in the medical machine was the humoral theory, a concept that had been kicking around since ancient Greece, specifically from Hippocrates, and later refined by Galen. Imagine that. Medical theories from toga wearing, philosophers still influencing treatments in an era of steam trains and burgeoning industrial might. It's like using a sundial to tell time on your smartphone, technically possible, but wildly inefficient. You might be thinking humors? What even are those? Well, dear listener, in a nutshell, ancient physicians believed the human body was composed of 4 primary fluids or humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each was associated with certain temperaments and organs, and, crucially, with specific qualities like hot, cold, wet, or dry. The idea was that health was a delicate balance of these humors. If you had too much of one or too little, you'd fall ill. It sounds remarkably quaint now, doesn't it? It's a bit like believing your bad mood is due to an excess of grumpy guts juice. Yet, this was the bedrock of medical understanding for centuries. Now, how does this relate to your persistent insomnia in a frilly Victorian nightgown? Well, sleeplessness, particularly the chronic, vexing kind, was often attributed to an imbalance of these humors. Perhaps you, with your racing mind, had an excess of yellow bile associated with a choleric, fiery temperament. Or maybe it was too much black bile linked to melancholy and, you guessed it, sleeplessness. It was a perfectly convenient explanation for something they didn't quite understand. Much like blaming a software glitch on a ghost in the machine, historians still argue whether the prolonged adherence to humoral theory stifled or inadvertently guided early medical inquiry into the body's complex systems. Did it provide a useful, if flawed, framework? Or was it a grand intellectual cul-de-sac? So, if your doctor, stroking his magnificent sideburns, determined you had an excess of, say, blood making you sanguine and overly energetic, perhaps he might prescribe bloodletting. Yes, that's right. They'd literally cut you and drain some of your blood, believing it would restore balance. You're lying there already weak from lack of sleep, and now they're making you weaker. It's a bit like trying to fix a leaky bucket by poking more holes in it. Quaint, isn't it? Or perhaps if you were deemed phlegmatic, sluggish, apathetic, you might be given an emetic to induce vomiting, designed to purge the excess phlegm. Imagine enduring that as a cure for insomnia. You'd probably wish for the sleeplessness back, wouldn't you? A quirky tidbit that adds to the bizarre nature of the time. Laudanum was often flavored to make it more palatable, sometimes with cinnamon, saffron, or even honey. Imagine a sweet, spicy sip that promised slumber, masking the bitter truth of its primary ingredient. It sounds almost inviting, doesn't it? Till, of course, you realize what you were truly consuming. Puts a whole new spin on a sweet dreams. Tic-tac. The impact of this ancient theory on everyday life was surprisingly profound. Even common ailments were often viewed through this lens. A fever might be treated with cooling remedies to reduce excess heat, or a chill with warming ones. And for insomnia, the approach often involved trying to cool down an overheated brain, or soothe agitated humors. This led to a range of curious, sometimes harmless, sometimes outright dangerous prescriptions. Remember that warm glass of milk we mentioned earlier? So that was a mild example? More intense interventions included? Applications of cold compresses to the head or even mild purgatives to cleanse the body of troublesome humors. It sounds like they were trying to recalibrate your internal thermostat using a medieval wrench rather than a precision instrument. The persistence of these theories into the scientific age is a fascinating, if somewhat alarming, testament to how deeply ingrained certain beliefs can become. Even as germ theory began to gain traction, and as understanding of anatomy and physiology slowly advanced, the old humoral ideas lingered. Like an unwelcome guest at a party, refusing to leave. It gave doctors a framework, however flawed, to explain the inexplicable. For you, the sleepless Victorian woman, it meant a long, often uncomfortable, journey through remedies that, while sometimes offering a placebo effect, rarely addressed the root cause of your profound exhaustion. You were caught between an ancient past and an emerging, often hesitant scientific future yearning for the simple balm of sleep. With the stubborn ghost of humoral theory still lingering in the medical halls, it's perhaps no surprise that Victorian doctors, and indeed the sleepless public, often turn to more potent, if equally misguided, solutions. Imagine your eyes, gritty, your head aching, and the promise of blissful oblivion beckoning from a small, dark bottle. We're talking, of course, about laudanum, the undisputed superstar of Victorian sleep aids, and indeed a panacea for countless other ailments. This wasn't some fringe concoction whispered about in back alleys. Laudanum was as ubiquitous as tea, and arguably even more deeply ingrained in the fabric of daily life. You'd find it everywhere. Your local apothecary, a respectable establishment, with gleaming glass jars and the comforting scent of herbs, would stock it prominently. Housewives kept it in their medicine cabinets right alongside their smelling salts and cough syrups. It was given to fussy babies, to soothe teething pain, to quiet restless children. It was prescribed for everything from menstrual cramps to tuberculosis, from anxiety to, naturally, your agonizing insomnia. Think of it as the Victorian equivalent of a DOL painkiller. Sleep aid and General McKay. Everything feel better potion. All rolled into one potent liquid. So what exactly was this miraculous elixir? Laudanum at its heart was simply an alcoholic tincture of opium. Yes, that's right, raw opium dissolved in spirits. It contained a powerful cocktail of alkaloids, primarily morphine, codeine, and theabine, all derived from the poppy plant. It worked, of course. It really worked. You'd take a few drops, feel a warm languor spread through your limbs, and soon enough, the oppressive weight of sleeplessness would lift, replaced by a hazy, dreamlike state that often led to sleep. For a population tormented by chronic pain, anxiety, and profound lack of rest, it must have felt like a true godsend. The immediate relief was so profound, so complete, that it's easy to understand its widespread acceptance, despite the complete ignorance of its long-term effects. The problem, as you can probably already surmise, was the tiny, inconvenient detail of addiction. A mainstream historical fact often overlooked is just how prevalent opiate addiction was in the Victorian era. Largely due to the casual availability and widespread use of laudanum, it wasn't seen as a moral failing. It was simply what happened when one took too much of a powerful medicine. Quaint, isn't it? It's like blaming your unshakable coffee habit on the coffee, not on your need for caffeine. Women, in particular, were susceptible, often self-medicating for their daily ailments and social anxieties, almost silently slipping into dependence in the privacy of their homes. This quiet epidemic played out in countless bedrooms and drawing rooms across the nation. A quirky tidbit that adds to the bizarre nature of the time, laudanum was often flavored to make it more palatable, sometimes with cinnamon, saffron, or even honey. Imagine a sweet, spicy sip that promised slumber, masking the bitter truth of its primary ingredient. It sounds almost inviting, doesn't it? Until, of course, you realize what you were truly consuming. It puts a whole new spin on a sweet dreams nightcap. Historians still argue whether the medical community genuinely understood the addictive properties of opium-based preparations, or if their knowledge was simply too primitive to grasp the full implications. Were they truly ignorant, or did the immediate relief it offered, coupled with the lack of viable alternatives, lead them to overlook the escalating problem? Some scholars suggest a deliberate downplaying of risks, while others point to a genuine scientific blind spot. The debate swirls, much like the smoky haze that might have filled a Victorian room where laudanum was being consumed. So you, the sleepless Victorian woman, might have found yourself caught in this insidious trap. A few drops for sleep, then a few more when the anxiety returned, then more still, just to feel normal. It was a secret burden carried by many, a silent struggle behind closed doors. The initial promise of laudanum's lullaby often turned into a harsh reality. As the body demanded more, and the mind became increasingly reliant. Remember that earlier idea about nervous energy? Well, laudanum certainly quieted the nerves, but at what a cost? The calm it brought was temporary, replaced by a deeper, more profound form of exhaustion if the dose wasn't met. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the quickest fix can lead to the most complex problems. Having navigated the murky waters of humoral theory and the siren song of laudanum, you, the Victorian insomniac, might be forgiven for feeling a little disheartened. The immediate, albeit treacherous, relief offered by opium-based concoctions was undeniable, but the mounting awareness of its darker side was slowly, almost reluctantly beginning to surface. This wasn't a sudden epiphany. Rather, it was a gradual, societal awakening. A creeping realization that trading one problem, sleeplessness, for another addiction wasn't quite the medical marvel it initially seemed. The whispers about laudanum. Addiction grew louder, moving from hushed drawing room anxieties to more open discussions in medical journals and public lectures. You see, while laudanum was widely available and largely unregulated for much of the 19th century, its pervasive use eventually led to visible, undeniable consequences. The gaunt faces, the trembling hands, the increasingly erratic behavior of those in its grip, these were hard to ignore. Even for a society often keen to sweep unpleasantries under the rug, it began to be recognized as a significant social problem, not just a personal failing. This growing discomfort with opiates became a major driving force in the search for gentler, less harmful alternatives. It was less about moralistic judgment at first, and more about practical necessity. People needed sleep, but they also needed to function without being chained to a bottle. Mainstream medical professionals, while still relying on laudanum for severe pain or intractable cases, increasingly started looking for remedies that wouldn't turn their patients into dependents. It was a gradual shift, like trying to turn a very large, slow-moving ship. Doctors began to advocate for tonics and nervine sedatives that purported to calm the nervous system without the addictive properties of opium. These often contained bromide salts, valerian, or even cannabis, though the latter's effects were less understood and therefore less consistently prescribed. It was an era of intense experimentation, a medical Wild West where everything from electric belts to arsenic was pitched as a cure-all, but the underlying drive was clear: find something that works, without the nasty side effects that lead to a lifetime of dependence. A quirky tidbit that highlights this transition: patent medicine advertisements, which were plastered everywhere, from newspapers to barnsides, started to subtly shift their language. While still promising miraculous cures, the newer products often emphasize being non-habit forming or opium-free, a clear indicator that public awareness and concern about addiction were on the rise. Imagine seeing an ad for a miracle sleep syrup explicitly stating guaranteed not to make you a drooling automaton. It's a bit like modern food labels boasting gluten-free or non-GMO, responding to a perceived public anxiety. Historians still argue whether the decline in casual laudanum use was primarily due to increased public awareness of addiction, more stringent government regulations which came later in the century, the gradual emergence of slightly safer, if not always effective, alternatives. Was it a top-down legislative push, or a grassroots societal shift driven by personal suffering? It's likely a complex interplay of all these factors, each contributing to the slow unraveling of opium's unchallenged reign. So for you, our sleepless Victorian lady, this period was one of cautious optimism mixed with continued frustration. You might have seen friends or acquaintances succumb to the insidious grip of laudanum, making you wary of its deceptive comfort. Your doctor, perhaps now less inclined to reach for the dark bottle, might instead have prescribed a new herbal concoction, a nerve tonic designed to soothe your agitated sensibilities. You'd try it, of course, desperate for any shred of relief. This was a time of hopeful exploration, a period when people were actively seeking nature's gentle embrace, rather than the harsh grip of powerful narcotics. Next surprising discovery: how a common garden vegetable came to symbolize this shift towards more benign, natural sleep aids. You're moving away from the dangerous allure of quick fixes and towards something much greener, much gentler. So, you've decided to shy away from the treacherous comfort of laudanum, wisely seeking a path to slumber that doesn't involve the creeping shadow of addiction. This growing public awareness, remember, spurred a fascinating pivot in the quest for sleep, leading Victorian seekers of repose back to something utterly unexpected. Something that might even be lurking in your own salad bowl right now. Yes, dear listener, we're talking about lettuce. It's not just any lettuce, mind you, but lettuce with a purpose. A leafy green champion poised to re-enter the medical spotlight, you see. The idea of lettuce as a soporific, or sleep-inducing agent, wasn't some whimsical Victorian invention. Oh no. This particular herbal remedy had roots stretching back thousands of years, anchoring itself firmly in the rich soil of ancient botanical knowledge. It's a wonderful example of how medical wisdom, like fashion, often cycles back into vogue, sometimes with a few new frills, but fundamentally the same. Imagine a concept that predates plumbing and electric light, making a grand return in an age of intricate machinery and burgeoning scientific inquiry. It's almost comically anachronistic. It's like trying to navigate a bustling city with only a parchment map. The ancient Egyptians, for instance, cultivated lettuce, not just for its crisp leaves and a meal, but also for its medicinal properties, believing it could promote tranquility. The Greeks, too, were on board. Hippocrates, that grand old father of medicine whose humoral theories we just endured, reportedly prescribed lettuce for its calming effects, and the Romans, they apparently ate it. After meals to aid digestion, and crucially to induce drowsiness before a good night's rest, think of it as their equivalent of a post-dinner chamomile tea only. Leave fear. This knowledge was meticulously passed down through various herbal compendiums and folk traditions, surviving the intellectual dark ages to gently resurface in the 19th century, dusted off and given a renewed, hopeful glance by Victorian society. Mainstream botanical and medical texts, even those from earlier centuries, often contained entries on Lactuca sativa, that's your common garden lettuce. In fancy Latin and its more potent wild cousin, Lactuca virosa, noting their sedative qualities, it wasn't exactly a well-guarded secret. What changed in the Victorian era was the urgency of the need and the willingness to explore seemingly humble natural options, especially as the dark clouds of opiate addiction gathered. You were, after all, looking for something that didn't come with a hidden cost, something that felt wholesome and natural, a gentle nudge towards slumber rather than a heavy-handed shove. Quirky tidbit that might make you chuckle. Some ancient texts even suggested that eating too much lettuce before battle would make soldiers too drowsy to fight effectively. So if you were planning a skirmish, maybe skip the pregame salad. It's a bit like modern athletes avoiding heavy meals before a race, but with far more dramatic, potentially sleep-inducing consequences. Perhaps the Spartans missed a trick. Instead of intense training, they should have just fed their enemies giant bowls of leafy greens. Historians still argue whether this renewed interest in ancient herbal remedies like lettuce was a genuine scientific progression, a desperate reach for any alternative, or simply a cyclical return to what was familiar and culturally accepted before the age of more powerful pharmaceuticals. Was it a sign of enlightened naturalism, or just throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks? The truth, as ever, is probably a blend of all three. You, for one, didn't much care for the academic debate, you just wanted to sleep. So as you lay awake, the gaslight flickering outside your window, the whispers of laudanum's dangers fading, a new, greener hope began to emerge. The humble lettuce, once a simple salad ingredient, was now seen as a potential key to unlocking the gates of peaceful slumber. It offered the allure of a natural, non-addictive solution, a gentle hand guiding you away from restless nights. But how exactly would this crisp, watery vegetable transform into a potent sleep aid? And what was its secret ingredient? That, dear listener, is where our journey takes an even more fascinating turn. So, you're clinging to the burgeoning hope that lettuce, humble as it seems, might hold the key to your elusive slumber. But it's not just about munching on a few leaves before bed. The Victorians, ever keen on extracting the essence of things, believed in something more potent, a hidden power within the plant. This, dear listener, brings us to the intriguing compound known as lacticarium. Often dubbed lettuce opium, it was the superstar ingredient. It's the very reason lettuce made its grand comeback in the insomniac's arsenal. You see, if you've ever broken a lettuce leaf, especially from the stem of certain varieties, you've probably noticed a milky, white sap oozing out. This sticky, bitter liquid is where the magic, or at least the perceived magic, resides. This sap, when dried, forms a brownish gummy substance, lacticarium. It was believed to contain the plant's sedative properties in a concentrated form, much like how poppy sap yields opium. For the Victorians, this was a clear parallel. It's offering a natural alternative to the highly addictive laudanum. Without the moral quandaries or the immediate, undeniable dangers of a heavy opiate habit, it was like finding a decaffeinated coffee that still gave you a gentle buzz. Mainstream scientific and medical literature of the time, while still in its nascent stages regarding organic chemistry, did recognize lacticarium. Early pharmacopoeias included it, describing its appearance, taste, and purported effects. It was often listed as a mild sedative, hypnotic, and even anodyne pain reliever. Physicians eager to move away from opium saw it as a promising substitute. It seemed to offer all the benefits of opium, calming the nerves, inducing sleep, easing mild aches, without the terrifying specter of addiction. This distinction, however, was somewhat a matter of degree, as any powerful sedative can lead to dependence, even if not as fiercely as morphine. But for the Victorian mind, the natural origin and milder perceived effects made it vastly preferable. A quirky tidbit from the era illustrates the almost desperate optimism surrounding lacticarium. Some chemists and herbalists began marketing pure lacticarium extracts, promising incredibly potent yet harmless sleep. These often came in small vials, a thick, dark liquid, almost syrupy. Imagine the marketing pitch. All the slumber, none of the sin, was the ultimate feel-good. Sleep well, guilt-free solution, or so they wanted you to believe. It's a bit like modern superfood trends, where one isolated compound is touted as the miraculous answer to all your woes. Historians still argue whether the perceived efficacy of lacticarium was primarily due to its actual pharmacological properties, or if the placebo effect played a much larger role, especially given the fervent desire for a safe alternative to opiates. Was there enough active compound to genuinely induce sleep? Or was it largely the power of belief, bolstered by the psychological relief of avoiding addiction? The debate highlights the complex interplay between chemistry, psychology, societal need, and the history of medicine. So, as you lay there, pondering the bitter sap of a lettuce leaf, you felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't some mysterious, dangerous concoction from far-off lands, but something that grew in gardens, something familiar and seemingly benign. The idea was simple, yet profound. If opium came from a poppy's sap, why couldn't a gentler sedative come from lettuce sap? It fit the burgeoning Victorian desire for natural remedies, a turn away from harsh chemicals and back towards nature's gentle embrace. This quest for a natural saporific, remember, was driven by the shadow of laudanum, pushing you and countless others towards greener pastures, quite literally. The stage was set for how this watery substance would be prepared and consumed, a process that would surprisingly involve another popular health trend of the era. With the promise of lacticarium, that lettuce opium dancing in your sleep-deprived mind. The next logical question, of course, is how you actually got this wondrous substance from the leaf to your lips. This wasn't a matter of simply eating a large salad before bed, though perhaps some tried that. Instead, the Victorians, ever methodical in their pursuit of health and wellness, integrated their newfound appreciation for lettuce's sedative properties with another booming health trend of the era, hydrotherapy, or as it was more commonly known, the water cure. You see, water was having its moment in the sun, or rather, its moment in the bathhouse. Originating in Silesia in the early 19th century, with Vienna's pre-snits. The water cure gained immense popularity across Europe and, naturally, made its way to Victorian England. Large hydrotherapy establishments, looking suspiciously like luxurious spas mixed with medical clinics, sprang up everywhere from Malvern to Matlock. People flocked to them, believing that various applications of water, hot, cold, wraps, douches, sitz baths, plunges, could cure everything from gout to, you guessed it, your persistent insomnia. It was seen as a natural, invigorating, and purifying alternative to the often harsh and dubious chemical concoctions of the day. You'd think. It was the invention of a giant holistic car wash for humans. So how did this water cure craze influence your lettuce water? It wasn't about plunging yourself into a tub of leafy green liquid, thankfully. Instead, the principles of hydrotherapy emphasized the extraction of beneficial compounds through soaking, brewing, and infusing. If water could draw toxins from your body, surely it could also draw the potent lacticarium from the lettuce, right? This led to the widespread practice of making lettuce water, not just by eating the leaves, but by steeping them. It imbued the simple act of preparing your bedtime beverage with a sense of scientific rigor. Even if the science was, well, still a bit soggy around the edges, the process often began by taking the outer, often bitter leaves of the lettuce, or specifically cultivating varieties known to produce more sap, like the wild lettuce Lactuca virosa. These were then either chopped finely, or in some cases, simply bruised to encourage the release of the milky sap. Then, boiling water was poured over them, sometimes steeped for a considerable period, much like making an extra strong tea. Resulting liquid, once strained, was your prized lettuce water. It was consumed warm, often just before bed. This method aligns perfectly with the hydrotherapy ethos, using water as the primary medium to extract and deliver nature's therapeutic essence. It was a neat, if not entirely scientifically robust, fusion of two popular health philosophies, a quirky tidbit that puts a smile on your face. Some more enthusiastic adherents of the water cure even suggested that the lettuce water should be consumed while taking a cold foot bath or with a damp compress on the forehead. The multi-pronged attack on insomnia. It's almost as if they believed a fully hydrated body, inside and out, was simply too waterlogged to stay awake. You can just imagine the scene. Chilling your feet in a basin, sipping lukewarm slightly, bitter lettuce water, and trying to keep a damp cloth balanced on your brow, all in the name of a good night's sleep. It sounds less like a cure and more like a bizarre performance art piece. Historians still argue whether the popularity of the water cure, by extension the methods for preparing remedies like lettuce water, was genuinely driven by observed health benefits, or was simply a fashionable trend, appealing to the era's growing interest in natural health and self-improvement. Was it a primitive form of preventative medicine, or just a clever marketing ploy for grand hydropalaces? The question persists, like the lingering chill from a cold compress. So, as the gaslight dimmed and your household settled, you, our sleepless Victorian lady, would carefully prepare your evening draft. The gentle steam rising from the bowl of steeping lettuce leaves carried with it not just the faint, earthy scent of the garden, but also the weighty hopes of a truly restful night. This wasn't a desperate gulp of laudanum from a hidden bottle. This was a deliberate, almost ritualistic act of self-care, conscious choice to embrace nature's purported gentle path to slumber. The stage is now perfectly set to unveil the precise, meticulous steps involved in brewing this most intriguing of bedtime beverages. With the water cure philosophies firmly in mind, you, our diligent Victorian seeker of slumber, approach the preparation of your lettuce water not as a casual tea-making, but as a precise, almost alchemical ritual. This wasn't just about boiling water and throwing in some leaves. It was a meticulous process, believed to unlock the full soporific potential of the humble vegetable. Imagine the anticipation, the quiet hope that each carefully executed step brought you closer to that elusive night of rest. The first step naturally involved acquiring the right kind of lettuce. While common garden lettuce Lactuca sativa could be used, particularly the older, more bitter outer leaves, the true connoisseur of sleep aids often sought out wild lettuce Lactuca virosa. This was the plant believed to contain a higher concentration of that precious lacticarium, the lettuce opium we discussed earlier. You might send your gardener, or perhaps even venture out yourself, to forage for this slightly more robust, often taller, and notably more bitter cousin of your everyday salad greens. It looked less like something you'd dress with vinaigrette and more like a determined weed. If you found yourself pulling up what looked like a dandelion's grumpy older brother, you were probably on the right track. Once the lettuce was gathered, the preparation began. You carefully washed the leaves, ensuring no lingering garden soil or unwelcome insects made their way into your bedtime brew. Then came the crucial part, bruising or finely chopping the leaves. This wasn't just for ease of steeping. The act of damaging the plant tissue was understood to encourage the release of that milky lactocarium-rich sap. Imagine the gentle crushing, the slight stickiness on your fingers as you prepared the leaves. It's a bit like preparing herbs. For a poultice, where the essence needs to be released through a bit of forceful persuasion next, the boiling water. The water was brought to a rolling boil, then poured directly over the prepared lettuce leaves, which were usually placed in a heat-proof bowl or a porcelain infuser. The quantity of water was often specified, with various recipes suggesting anything from a pint to a quart of water per handful of leaves. Depending on the desired strength, you wanted a concentrated brew, not just lightly flavored water. It was essential to use fresh, clean water in keeping with the purity advocated by the hydrotherapy movement. You wouldn't want any impurities diluting the precious sedative properties. Then came the steeping. This was perhaps the most crucial stage, requiring patience and a watchful eye. The mixture would be left to steep, typically for 10 to 15 minutes. Though some recipes recommended longer, allowing the water to cool slightly and draw out the active compounds. As it steeped, the water would likely take on a pale greenish hue, perhaps with a faint, earthy aroma. You might stir it occasionally, ensuring thorough extraction. It's a process not unlike brewing a strong herbal tea, only with the added weight of your desperate hopes for sleep. You could almost feel the sleep seeping into the water, couldn't you? A quirky tidbit related to brewing. Some Victorian recipes suggested adding a pinch of salt to the water. Not for flavor, but believing it somehow aided in the extraction process or made the lacticarium more soluble. It's a charming example of the intuitive, sometimes unscientific, additions that crept into folk remedies passed down through generations. Imagine explaining that to a modern chemist. Yes, just a little sodium chloride to enhance the sedative. Properties of my plant sap infusion, thank you very much. Historians still argue whether the specific methods of preparing lettuce water, like bruising the leaves or using precise steeping times, were truly based on empirical observations of efficacy, or if they were largely ritualistic practices adopted. For psychological comfort and a sense of control over the unpredictable nature of insomnia, did the salt actually help, or did it just make you feel like you were doing everything right? The debate highlights the fine line between therapeutic action and comforting ritual in historical medicine. Finally, once steeped, the liquid was carefully strained, separating the exhausted lettuce leaves from the precious, now infused lettuce water. This clear or slightly cloudy liquid was then ready for consumption. It was typically drunk warm, just before retiring for the night. You'd sip it slowly, perhaps hoping to taste the very essence of sleep, the natural balm for your weary mind. This careful preparation, steeped in both ancient wisdom and contemporary health fads, was your nightly plea for peace. And so, with your cup in hand, you would then embark on the most important phase, the waiting game, the hopeful descent into the land of dreams. With your freshly brewed lettuce water, perhaps still warm in your hands, you finally reach the moment of truth. You sip it, perhaps cautiously at first, wondering if this earthy, slightly bitter concoction will truly be your salvation from the relentless grip of insomnia. This wasn't just about drinking a liquid, it was about internalizing hope, a tangible act of faith in nature's gentle power. The Victorians, ever keen on anecdotal evidence and personal testimony, eagerly shared their experiences turning their bedrooms into informal laboratories of slumber. You see, the effectiveness of lettuce water, like many herbal remedies, was largely measured by personal accounts and observation rather than rigorous scientific trials. There were no double-blind studies, no placebo-controlled groups, just you, your cup, and the dawn that always seemed to arrive too soon. Yet, for many, the testimonials were glowing. Ladies reported feeling a gentle drowsiness, a calming sensation spreading through their agitated nerves. The relentless mental chatter that kept them awake would quiet, allowing their minds to finally drift towards sleep. Some even claimed it brought about particularly pleasant dreams, though that might have been the sheer relief talking. Mainstream medical journals and popular health publications of the era, while often cautious, did publish accounts and discussions about lacticarium and lettuce water. Articles would describe its purported sedative and anodyne pain-relieving qualities, often citing vague clinical observations or case studies. One prominent physician might note how a nervous patient previously reliant on laudanum found blessed relief with the vegetable brew. This wasn't necessarily rigorous science, but it was enough to fuel belief and encourage wider adoption. It was a bit like your friend swearing by a new herbal supplement today. You might be skeptical, but if they say it works, you might just try it yourself. A quirky tidbit that reflects the era's optimism. Some advertisements for sleep tonics or nerve calmatives would occasionally list extract of lactuca lettuce. Extract among their ingredients, even if the primary active component was still something else entirely. It was a way of tapping into the growing interest in natural remedies and the perceived safety of lettuce. Imagine a modern energy drink, proudly proclaiming, contains a hint of kale. It was more about public perception and appealing to the zeitgeist than strict scientific accuracy. Historians still argue whether the documented success stories of lettuce water were predominantly due to a strong placebo effect, genuine mild sedative properties, or simply the psychological comfort of engaging in a proactive, seemingly healthy ritual before bed. Was the act of preparing and consuming it, the very belief in its power, enough to tip the scales towards sleep for a mind exhausted by worry? The debate highlights the enduring mystery of the mind-body connection in healing, a question that continues to fascinate researchers today. So as you lay in bed, perhaps the slightest hint of earthiness still on your tongue, you'd wait. The feeling wouldn't be the sudden heavy thud of laudanum-induced oblivion. Instead, it was described as a gentle easing, a gradual softening of the edges of wakefulness. Your muscles would relax, the tension in your jaw would lessen, and the frantic thoughts that had plagued you through countless sleepless nights would slowly, thankfully, begin to dissipate. It was a more natural descent into slumber, one that left you feeling refreshed rather than drugged upon waking. Or at least, that was the fervent hope and the anecdotal evidence that kept the practice alive. This widespread sharing of experiences, these quiet testimonies passed between women at tea parties and in whispered conversations, cemented lettuce water's place in the Victorian home. It was a small, personal rebellion against the harshness of medical convention and the insidious grip of opium. It represented a longing for gentler solutions, for remedies that felt wholesome and pure. And as the morning sun, much gentler than the gaslight, finally filtered through your curtains, you would rise, perhaps a little groggy, but with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face the day and perhaps another night's brew. The glowing testimonials and hopeful anecdotes surrounding lettuce water, while comforting to you, the sleepless Victorian woman, didn't necessarily sway every influential mind in the hallowed halls of medicine. The popularity of home remedies and natural cures surged. The medical establishment found itself in a precarious position, grappling with a public eager for alternatives to harsh traditional treatments and the growing problem of opiate addiction. This led to a fascinating, often heated debate within professional circles regarding the true efficacy and appropriate place of remedies, like lettuce water, you see. For every doctor who cautiously embraced plant-based sedatives as a milder alternative, there was another who viewed them with outright skepticism, if not disdain. These were the guardians of conventional medicine, often trained in a system that still revered the dramatic impact of powerful drugs and surgical interventions. To them, relying on something as seemingly innocuous as lettuce might have felt akin to asking a gardener to perform brain surgery. It simply wasn't proper medicine. They preferred substances with a more immediate, measurable effect, even if those effects came with significant drawbacks. Mainstream medical journals of the day reflect this divided opinion quite clearly. You'd find articles praising the promise of lacticarium as a non-narcotic sedative in one issue, only to encounter scathing condemnations of quackery and folk remedies in the next. Some physicians argued that any perceived benefit was purely psychological, a triumph of belief over botany. Others conceded that there might be mild sedative properties, but deemed them too weak for serious cases of insomnia, reserving their trust for more potent pharmaceutical preparations. It was a classic tug-of-war between empiricism and perceived scientific rigor, a bit like watching a wrestling match where one side is dressed in a lab coat and the other in a toga made of herbs. A quirky tidbit from this debate involves the varying quality of lacticarium itself, since it was extracted from different varieties of lettuce, grown in different conditions, and processed in varied ways. The potency of lettuce opium could fluctuate wildly. One batch might offer a gentle nudge towards slumber, while another might be little more than slightly bitter water. This inconsistency fueled the skepticism of many doctors, who correctly pointed out that if a remedy couldn't be reliably replicated, its scientific merit was questionable. Imagine trying to conduct a trial where your active ingredient was as variable as the weather. Historians still argue whether the medical establishment's cautious or even dismissive attitude towards herbal remedies, like lettuce water, stemmed from genuine scientific skepticism, a desire to professionalize and control medical practice, or a combination of both. Was it an understandable caution against unreliable treatments, or a territorial defense of their burgeoning pharmaceutical toolkit against perceived amateur threats? The debate touches upon the very evolution of modern medicine and the shifting power dynamics between professional doctors and lay healers. So, for you, the individual patient navigating this medical landscape could be utterly confusing. One doctor might nod approvingly at your nightly lettuce brew, while another might scoff, prescribing a stronger, potentially more dangerous remedy. You were caught in the cross-currents of a medical paradigm shift, where ancient wisdom clashed with nascent scientific inquiry. The constant search for what truly worked, what was truly safe, became a deeply personal quest, one often undertaken without clear guidance from the very people meant to provide it. This lack of consensus, this professional debate, further highlights the desperation that drove people to try anything. Humble lettuce in their relentless fight against sleeplessness. It also paved the way for remedies to become not just medical interventions, but fashionable fads driven by public opinion as much as by scientific endorsement. The medical establishment's mixed signals on lettuce water, dear listener, only added to the confusion for you. Our sleepless Victorian woman, in a world craving relief, remedies often transcended mere medical advice to become full-blown social phenomena driven by word of mouth, personal belief, and the relentless churn of public opinion. This era, remember, was ripe for fashionable fads, and the pursuit of new cures for common ailments, like insomnia, was no exception. Lettuce water, for a time, rode this wave, propelled by both genuine hope and the fickle winds of popular fancy. You see, in Victorian society, illness, especially among women, often became a topic of drawing room conversation. Ladies would share their symptoms, commiserate over their sleepless nights, and eagerly exchange tips on the latest remedies. If Lady So-and-so swore that lettuce water finally brought her peace, then every woman in her social circle might feel compelled to try. It wasn't just about getting better. It was about participating in a shared experience, a collective quest for wellness that was as much social as it was medical. This made remedies like lettuce water spread like wildfire through certain strata of society, regardless of official medical endorsement. It's a bit like a viral TikTok trend today, only instead of dance moves, it's about herbal infusions. Mainstream publications, beyond the purely medical journals, also played a significant role. Women's magazines, etiquette guides, and domestic manuals often included sections on household remedies, health tips, and personal hygiene. These would feature recipes for soothing tinctures or nerve tonics, sometimes including lettuce water. The language used was often gentle and reassuring, appealing directly to the anxieties of their female readership. These articles rarely delved into complex pharmacology. Instead, they emphasized simplicity, naturalness, and ease of preparation within the home. It was medical advice tailored for the domestic sphere, making it feel accessible and empowering for you to take charge of your own wellness. A quirky tidbit that underscores the faddish nature: some enterprising individuals began selling prepared lettuce extract or lactocarium pills at fancy apothecaries, capitalizing on the popularity without requiring you to brew your own. These often came in beautifully labeled bottles or elegant tins, promising convenience and potency. Then package and sell it back to the masses, likely at a considerable markup. It's a bit like how artisanal kombucha started in kitchens and ended up on supermarket shelves with a fancy price tag. Historians still argue whether the rise and eventual decline of specific popular remedies like lettuce water were primarily due to their actual efficacy or lack thereof. The emergence of genuinely superior alternatives, simply the natural ebb and flow of public interest in a crowded market of cures. Was it a genuine medical breakthrough that faded, or just another passing craze fueled by hope and clever marketing? The answer likely lies in the nuanced interplay of scientific development, societal trends, and the enduring human desire for a quick and easy solution. However, as with most fads, the intense popularity of lettuce water eventually began to wane. Perhaps it was the inconsistent potency of the homemade brew, or the slow realization that while it might offer mild relief, it wasn't a universal cure for severe insomnia. Stronger, though often riskier, alternatives continued to be developed. And the novelty of a lettuce cure eventually gave way to the next promising, fashionable remedy. You might have found yourself, after several weeks or months of diligent lettuce water consumption, still tossing and turning, leading you to abandon it for the next hopeful venture. It was a cycle of hope, trial, and sometimes quiet disappointment. Constant search, this willingness to try new and often unconventional things, speaks volumes about the pervasive nature of insomnia in Victorian society and the limited effective treatments available. You were a participant in a grand collective experiment, forever seeking that perfect potion, that gentle lullaby that would finally bring you true restorative sleep. And as you put away your lettuce-stained infuser, a new question would inevitably arise. Was it all in your head? As the lettuce water fad slowly began to recede, perhaps leaving you still somewhat bleary-eyed, a deeper, more fundamental question likely began to gnaw at your restless mind. How much of that fleeting relief, that gentle drift towards slumber, was truly due to the lactocarium, and how much was simply you? This, dear listener, brings us to the subtle, yet immensely powerful concept of the placebo effect. It's a phenomenon that has fascinated thinkers for centuries. And in the context of Victorian sleep remedies, it plays a starring, if often unacknowledged, role. You see, the human mind is a remarkably complex and influential thing. When you truly believe a treatment will work, sometimes that belief itself can trigger physiological responses that mimic the effects of the treatment. Your body, convinced it's receiving a powerful sleep aid, might just relax, quiet your racing thoughts, and allow you to drift off. It's not all in your head in a dismissive sense, but rather a testament to the incredible power of your own brain to influence your physical state. Imagine you've been struggling for months, desperate for sleep, and finally, a seemingly harmless natural remedy comes along, championed by friends and even some medical professionals. The sheer relief and hope that wash over you as you sip that warm lettuce water could, in itself, be a potent sedative. It's like finding a perfectly comfortable pillow after years of lumpy ones. the battle is won by the expectation of comfort. Mainstream medical understanding of the placebo effect was rudimentary, if existent at all, in the Victorian era. They certainly didn't have the sophisticated research methods we employ today to isolate its influence.
However,
Observations of patients responding positively to inert substances or treatments they believed would work were not uncommon, even if they couldn't articulate why. This subtle psychological influence was often lumped under nervous temperament or imagination. But for you, the insomniac, if it brought relief, did the how truly matter? A good night's sleep by any means was a victory. A quirky tidbit. That demonstrates the placebo's historical reach. Snake oil salesmen, staple of both American and British society, thrived on this effect. Their miracle cures, often little more than colored water or alcohol, sometimes genuinely made people feel better simply because the customer had spent money, listened to a captivating sales pitch, and desperately wanted to believe. The Victorians were particularly susceptible to such grand promises, and the quiet dignity of brewing lettuce water was perhaps just a more respectable, domestic version of this powerful psychological dynamic. It's a bit like buying fancy running shoes. It might not instantly make you faster, but the belief that they will can certainly motivate you to train harder. Historians still argue whether the success of many Victorian herbal and folk remedies, including lettuce water, was predominantly a manifestation of the placebo effect, or if these plants possessed genuinely mild therapeutic properties that simply weren't strong enough for severe cases or rigorous scientific verification. Was the lettuce opium truly an active compound, or was it the soothing ritual, the hopeful expectation, yes, and the psychological relief that provided the elusive slumber? This debate underscores the ongoing challenge in studying historical treatments without modern controls. So, as you reflect on your lettuce water journey, you might recognize that subtle shift in your internal state even before the last drop was consumed. The feeling of doing something, of actively pursuing a natural solution, brought a sense of control that was often missing in your life. This empowerment, coupled with the desperate desire for sleep, created a fertile ground for the placebo effect to work its quiet magic. It wasn't a trick, it was a deeply human response, a testament to your mind's capacity for self-healing and the profound impact of belief. And as you consider this, you might notice something fascinating: how some of these Victorian approaches, despite their apparent quaintness, echo surprisingly in our modern pursuit of wellness. Having explored the delicate dance between genuine botanical properties and the powerful sway of the placebo effect, you might now feel a surprising sense of familiarity. Those Victorian women, meticulously brewing their lettuce water in dimly lit kitchens, were, in a curious way, precursors to many of today's wellness enthusiasts. Indeed, you'll find that the past, however distant, often whispers to the present, and there are surprising modern echoes of ancient practices, even in your own pursuit of rest and well-being. You see, the Victorian era's turn towards natural remedies, driven by a desire to escape the harshness of conventional medicine and the dangers of opiates, laid groundwork that persists today. Think about your own nightly rituals. Perhaps you sip a mug of herbal tea, chamomile, valerian, or passion flower, all plants known and used for centuries for their calming properties. While you might not be brewing lettuce water specifically, the underlying principle is remarkably similar, seeking solace and sedation from the gentle embrace of botanicals, rather than synthetic compounds. It's like finding a vintage record player that still works perfectly with your modern Bluetooth speaker. Mainstream wellness culture, particularly in recent decades, has seen a resurgence of interest in natural, holistic, and plant-based solutions for everything from stress to sleep. You'll find entire sections in pharmacies and health food stores dedicated to herbal sleep aids, adaptogens, and calming tinctures. Many of these products are derived from plants that the Victorians and even the ancients were familiar with. The idea of clean living or eating your medicine is not new. It's a direct descendant of the Victorian fascination with hydrotherapy and the belief that nature held the key to health. It's almost as if history is gently nudging us, saying, "See? We tried that too." A quirky tidbit that brings this connection home: there are even modern dietary trends that advocate for incorporating specific vegetables for their purported health benefits, including sleep. While not always framed as lettuce water, you might find articles suggesting specific leafy greens or cruciferous vegetables as part of a sleep-friendly diet. It's a softer, more integrated approach than a direct brew, but the core belief that what you consume from the plant kingdom can influence your rest remains remarkably consistent across centuries. Might be surprised to find your organic smoothie bowl has more in common with a Victorian concoction than you'd initially think. Historians still argue whether the contemporary wellness movement is a true scientific progression building on historical knowledge, or simply a modern repackaging of ancient folk wisdom and anecdotal remedies. Are we genuinely rediscovering lost truths about plant power? Or are we, like the Victorians, susceptible to the allure of natural solutions without always having robust scientific backing? The debate highlights the enduring tension between tradition, belief, and evidence-based practice in the ever-evolving landscape of health and healing. So, as you prepare for your own night's rest, perhaps reaching for a soothing tea or a magnesium supplement you can draw a quiet connection to. Those Victorian women, they, like you, were navigating a world of evolving medical understanding. Seeking comfort and sleep amidst life's inherent stresses, their quiet experiments with lettuce water were not so different from your own explorations of melatonin or meditation apps. The tools change, the language evolves, but the fundamental human quest for restorative sleep and the hope that nature holds some of the answers remains an unbroken thread through time. This continuous thread leads us to wonder, what exactly did later science reveal about this unassuming green leaf? Having seen the surprising echoes of Victorian sleep remedies in your own modern life, you might now be wondering, did science ever catch up with the humble lettuce? Did those whispers of lacticarium and lettuce opium ever get a proper scientific interrogation? The answer, dear listener, is yes, though perhaps not with the dramatic flair or conclusive answers you might hope for. Science, especially when it comes to complex natural compounds, often progresses in slow, deliberate steps, slowly verifying, or sometimes politely debunking old claims. You see, as the 20th century dawned and chemistry and pharmacology became increasingly sophisticated, researchers began to isolate and analyze the various compounds found in plants. This allowed them to move beyond anecdotal evidence and actually test the supposed active ingredients. When it came to lettuce, particularly the wild varieties rich in that milky sap, scientists did indeed identify compounds that could, theoretically, have sedative properties. These included sesquiterpene lactones, which are known to have bitter tastes and some pharmacological activity. So, the Victorians weren't entirely imagining things. There were active compounds present. Mainstream scientific research, however, soon revealed that while these compounds existed, their concentration in common lettuce, or even in homemade lettuce water, was generally quite low. To achieve a truly significant sedative effect, one would likely need to consume an enormous, perhaps unpalatably bitter amount of lacticarium. It was a bit like trying to get drunk by eating a single grape. Technically, there's alcohol, but you'd need a vineyard. This meant that while the lettuce opium wasn't a complete myth, it certainly wasn't the powerful, non-addictive alternative to laudanum that the Victorians had so desperately hoped for. The efficacy, as suspected by some skeptical doctors, was likely often mild, or heavily reliant on the placebo effect. A quirky tidbit that demonstrates this scientific demystification. Later in the 20th century, some researchers even tried to remarket concentrated lacticarium extracts as mild sedatives or cough suppressants, sometimes under the name lacticarium germanicum. However, they never achieved widespread pharmaceutical success, precisely because their effects were often too subtle and inconsistent compared to modern synthesized drugs. It was a brief, almost wistful attempt to revive an old dream, proving that some historical remedies are best left in the realm of charming folk medicine. Historians still argue whether the scientific community's later findings fully invalidate the historical use of lettuce water or if they simply provide a more precise understanding of its limitations. Did the Victorians derive no benefit, or was the benefit simply far less potent than they believed? Perhaps just enough to tip a moderately restless mind towards sleep. The debate highlights the continuous revaluation of historical medical practices through the lens of modern science, reminding us that effective can mean different things in different eras. So, for you armed with this modern understanding, the efforts of those Victorian women might seem both charmingly naive and incredibly poignant. They were seeking a solution with the best knowledge and resources available to them, grasping at every thread of hope. The scientific consensus eventually landed somewhere in the middle. Lettuce does contain sedative-like compounds, but not in the quantities needed to be a potent sleep aid for most people. The true power of that lettuce water, therefore, likely lay not just in its botanical essence, but in the ritual, the hope, the sheer desperation that accompanied each sip. It was a reminder that the human spirit, tirelessly seeking solace, often finds it where it can, even in the unassuming leaves of a garden plant. And as we reach the end of this curious historical journey, you'll see that the quest for a good night's sleep is truly a timeless human endeavor. And so, dear listener, our journey through the curious history of Victorian women and their quest for slumber, from the shadowy allure of laudanum to the gentle promise of lettuce water, draws to a close. You've witnessed their struggles, their hopes, and their ingenious, if sometimes misguided, attempts to woo the elusive embrace of sleep. As the final tendrils of this story unwind, you'll realize that this isn't just a tale of the past. It's a reflection of humanity's unending quest for that perfect restorative night. You see, the yearning for sleep is a fundamental human need, as old as time itself. From the earliest cave dwellers seeking refuge from nocturnal predators to the bustling Victorians battling the anxieties of industrial life, and now to you, navigating the constant hum of the digital age, the desire for peaceful slumber remains universal. The methods change, the science evolves, but the underlying drive to quiet the mind and rest the body persists. We are all, in a sense, still those Victorian women, peering into the darkness, hoping for the gentle hand of oblivion. Mainstream, contemporary science, with all its advancements, continues to grapple with the complexities of sleep. We have sophisticated sleep clinics, advanced pharmacology, and a wealth of understanding about sleep cycles and brainwaves. Yet, insomnia remains a prevalent issue, affecting millions worldwide. This ongoing challenge underscores a simple truth. Even with all our knowledge, the perfect, one-size-fits-all solution for sleep remains as elusive as ever. We are still, in many ways, experimenting, just like those Victorian seekers, albeit with different tools. A quirky tidbit that brings this full circle. Some modern wellness trends are even re-exploring the benefits of various plant compounds, often extracted and concentrated with far greater precision than the Victorians could manage. The search for natural, non-addictive sleep aids continues to be a vibrant area of research, echoing the very impulse that led to the rediscovery of lacticarium. It's almost as if history, like a soothing lullaby, repeats its most comforting themes. You might see a new supplement on the market and think, well, the Victorians would have loved that. Historians still argue whether humanity's relentless pursuit of sleep cures indicates a fundamental flaw in modern living, or if it's simply a testament to our ever-increasing awareness and scientific understanding of this vital biological process. Are we getting worse at sleeping, or just better at talking about it and trying to fix it? The debate is as endless as a sleepless night, a question that continues to turn over in the quiet hours before dawn. And now, as the last remnants of our historical journey begin to fade, allow your own body to remember the simple truth. The most profound sleep often comes not from complex concoctions or scientific breakthroughs, but from the quietude of a mind finally at peace. Feel your muscles begin to soften, the tension in your shoulders gently release. The sounds around you, once distractions, now blend into a gentle background hum, a comforting white noise. The images of flickering gas lights and winding mountain paths of stern doctors and hopeful women become distant, blurred. Let your breathing deepen, slow and steady, drawing in calm with each inhale. releasing every last vestige of wakefulness with each exhale. Imagine a soft, warm blanket settling over you, a gentle weight that pulls you deeper into your bed, into the mattress. The light, wherever you are, is growing dim, dimmer still, until only the softest glow remains, then none at all. Allow yourself to sink, to float, to simply be. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to think, only to yield to the gentle current pulling you down, down into the quiet, dark embrace of sleep. Let the worries of your day, like the stories of the past, drift away, becoming distant, unimportant echoes. You're safe, you're warm, you're tired. Now you are ready. Sweet dreams.